February 4th, 2023, Austin, Texas. It's 6:40 in the morning, and a thick, heavy fog has completely blanketed the runway. Visibility is practically zero, and you are the air traffic controller. You're sitting alone in the dark tower, just watching the glowing sweep of the radar screen. The weather outside is deteriorating rapidly. A FedEx Boeing 767 is approaching from the sky. You clear the cargo plane to land, but down on the ground, a Southwest Airlines Boeing 737 is waiting, and that flight is full of passengers. You clear the Southwest jet for takeoff on the exact same runway. Two massive aircraft, one single runway, heavy fog completely blinding the pilots. The FedEx pilots are descending through the clouds, trusting the instruments. And then they finally break through the fog. They look down. They see the Southwest plane directly beneath them. They are less than 100 feet apart. Acting on pure instinct, the FedEx pilot violently pulls the aircraft up, aborting the landing immediately. Over 100 lives nearly lost in a massive fireball. Just imagine sitting in that tower in stunned silence, your heart pounding in your chest, your hands physically shaking over the radio console. You hold thousands of lives in your hands every single minute. But what you didn't know is that this near disaster, it was inevitable. How did the safest airspace in the world become a ticking time bomb? Because a single mid-air collision wouldn't just be a tragedy. It would paralyze global travel. It would cost billions in economic damage instantly. And it would completely shatter international trust in American aviation. This is a terrifying reality.
But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to 1981. We must rewind to August 3rd, 1981. The Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization declared a massive strike. They demanded a 32-hour work week. They demanded better pay. They warned the public of severe stress. They warned of extreme occupational fatigue. President Ronald Reagan took decisive, ruthless action. He issued an ultimatum to the striking workers. Return to work within 48 hours or face termination. Over 11,000 air traffic controllers refused to return. President Reagan fired 11,345 air traffic controllers, and he banned them from federal service for life. The FAA had to rebuild the system entirely. They hired thousands of replacement controllers in a massive wave. But this created a demographic time bomb. Fast forward 3 decades. That specific wave of replacements reached mandatory retirement age. By the 2010s, the system was bleeding experienced veterans rapidly. Then came the political gridlock. Government shutdowns devastated the agency. In 2013, the FAA was forced to pause hiring completely. They stopped training new controllers. In 2019, a 35-day government shutdown froze the pipeline again. The FAA Academy in Oklahoma City sat completely empty. You cannot replace a veteran controller overnight. It takes 3 to 5 years to fully certify a new recruit. This was not an accident. The staffing collapse was mathematically guaranteed decades ago. Layer 1. The visible actor is the FAA. They are managing a daily, desperate crisis. Layer 2, the systemic force, is congressional gridlock. Budget freezes have starved the critical infrastructure for years.
The year is 2023. The pandemic travel slump is officially over. Airlines launch massive, aggressive operations. American, Delta, and United schedule record numbers of flights. The skies are completely saturated with metal. But the control towers are empty. According to reports, the FAA is short 3,000 controllers. Critical facilities operate at dangerous minimum staffing levels. The New York Terminal Radar Approach Control is severely undermanned. Controllers there manage the busiest airspace in the entire world. They handle JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark airports simultaneously. They're forced into mandatory 6-day work weeks. 10-hour shifts are standard operating procedure. Fatigue becomes a dangerous, silent epidemic across the country. On January 13th, 2023, the threat became undeniable. A Delta Airlines Boeing 737 was preparing to take off. It was rolling down a runway at JFK International Airport. Suddenly, an American Airlines Boeing 777 crossed the exact same runway. The American flight crossed without proper clearance. The controller in the tower saw the radar conflict. He was completely overwhelmed but acted fast. He shouted over the radio for Delta to cancel takeoff. The Delta pilots slammed on the heavy brakes. They stopped just 1,000 feet away from the American jet. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance for 3 agonizing seconds. The timing was not a coincidence. Exhausted controllers and rushed pilots make critical mistakes. The system was bending under unprecedented crushing weight. The operation launched by airlines outpaced the fragile infrastructure. Airlines prioritized rapid expansion over systemic safety limits. They scheduled more flights than the towers could safely handle. This matters deeply to American and British viewers. If you fly from London Heathrow to New York JFK, your safety depends on this. British Airways flights enter this exact congested, understaffed airspace every single day. You trust the system with your family's lives. But the system is fracturing under the pressure. But what the airlines didn't know was that the absolute breaking point was closer than ever.
How did the world respond to this chaos? Panic set in at the highest levels of government. On January 11th, 2023, the FAA took drastic, unprecedented action. The notice-to-air mission system failed completely. This critical system sends essential safety alerts to all pilots. Without it, aircraft cannot legally fly. The FAA grounded all departing flights across the United States. This was the first national ground stop since September 11th, 2001. Over 10,000 domestic and international flights were delayed. Over 1,300 flights were completely canceled. The global domino effect was immediate and severe. Flights from London and Manchester were grounded on the tarmac. Transatlantic commerce was completely paralyzed for hours. The National Transportation Safety Board announced emergency investigations. NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy issued severe public warnings. She stated the aviation system was flashing bright red warning signs. The FAA held an unprecedented safety summit in March 2023. They issued a rare, urgent aviation safety call to action. They begged the major airlines to reduce their summer flight schedules. In New York, the FAA cut flight requirements by 10%. They openly admitted they could not safely staff the airspace.
What counter-moves were made? The secondary players, the airlines, reacted with intense frustration. They blamed the federal government for ruining their profit models. They trimmed schedules, but demanded much faster controller hiring. But hiring is not a switch you can just flip. The domino effect of the central event was clear. Delayed flights caused missed connections. Missed connections caused angry passengers. And the entire global supply chain felt the immense friction. Present the verified but undercovered angle. The media focuses relentlessly on the tired controllers. They focus endlessly on the terrifying near misses. But look at the underlying economic motive, hiding in plain sight. Airlines received $54 billion in pandemic bailout funds. The payroll support program was meant to preserve systemic readiness. It was meant to keep the industry prepared for the rebound. Instead, airlines pushed thousands of senior pilots into early retirement. When consumer demand surged back, airlines scrambled for maximum revenue. They compressed massive schedules into very limited peak hours. This created dangerous, artificial choke points in the sky. This was an intelligence failure behind a political decision. Congress funded the wealthy airlines, but neglected the FAA infrastructure. The FAA still relies on technology from the 1990s. The true power structure here is deeply unbalanced. Layer 3, the hidden beneficiary, is the corporate airline lobby. Airlines operate with privatized profits and socialized infrastructure costs. They push the absolute limits of the public air traffic system. When delays inevitably happen, they blame the understaffed FAA. They demand the system handle infinite capacity with finite, exhausted resources. This is not speculation. Government Accountability Office reports confirm the systemic underfunding. The FAA Academy cannot physically process enough new recruits. Even if they could, washout rates are exceptionally high. The job requires extreme, rare cognitive processing skills. You must track dozens of moving targets in 3 dimensions. You cannot afford a single momentary mistake. The hidden truth is that safety margins are being eroded for corporate efficiency. Every extra flight is extra profit for the airline, but every extra flight is an extra burden on the controller.
What are the possible outcomes of this crisis? The verified risks are chilling and well documented. History tells us exactly what happens when ATC systems fail. In 1986, Aeromexico Flight 498 collided with a private Piper aircraft. It happened right over Cerritos, California. The controller was overwhelmed by an unauthorized aircraft entering his airspace. 82 people died in the collision and on the ground. The current near misses are identical, flashing warning signs. In 2023 alone, there were over 20 serious runway incursions. On February 27, 2023, another near miss happened in Boston. A Learjet crossed an intersecting runway without proper clearance. A JetBlue flight was preparing to land on that exact runway. The JetBlue pilot had to take evasive action instantly. A collision on a busy runway would cause hundreds of fatalities. A mid-air collision over a major city would be globally catastrophic. The economic impact would be utterly devastating. Aviation drives 5% of the United States gross domestic product. It enables the entire US and UK global supply chain. If the system experiences a fatal failure, public trust will vanish. Airlines will face unprecedented, massive groundings.
The expert consensus is unanimous and clear. The system requires a massive influx of modern technology immediately. It needs a completely modernized, expanded training pipeline. But Congress continues to pass short-term, temporary funding extensions. This political dysfunction prevents long-term strategic rebuilding. The stakes are literally life and death every single day. Controllers are retiring much faster than they can be replaced. The remaining workforce is burning out at record speeds. They are being pushed far beyond normal human limits. They work through sickness, stress, and chronic exhaustion.
It is time for a clear, fair verdict. What does this story really mean for us? It means that our critical infrastructure is invisible until it breaks. The real winners are the corporate airlines maximizing tight schedules. They reap the massive profits of a saturated, stressed airspace. The absolute losers are the overworked controllers and the flying public. Your safety is compromised to maintain their profit margins. What does this say about the current state of global power? The current state of global power relies on incredibly fragile networks. We trust our lives to an underfunded, outdated, strained system. The system runs purely on the dedication of exhausted humans. You hold 1,000 lives a minute in your hands. But
who is holding you? Are we willing to fund safety before a tragedy forces us to? Let us know in the comments what you think. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.